Welcome everybody to Scribe Academy. It's another beautiful day here in Norfolk. So it's our final session of Mastering Year End. And actually, every Mastering Year End, it's always been an awesome day. Is that something to do with you, Hannah? You always bring the good one.
Yeah, I take full credit.
Take full credit. So yes, it is that time of year. It's AGAR time, or is it AGAR time? I don't know. Some of you may be feeling a little bit overwhelmed and stressed, but don't worry, we are here to help you. You know, we do these events, they're open to everybody. It doesn't matter what software system you are using right now, you're all welcome. We're going to try and do a news sort of segment in our webinars. So Jess is, I don't think you actually volunteered, did you, Jess?
No, you volunteered me.
I kind of forced you to do it. So Jess, can you do some news, a news segment? So yeah, over to you, Jess.
So I thought I'd share some nice non-year end related news, because I know a lot of us can get bogged down at this time of year. So as you all know, the King's coronation is taking place, so on the 6th of May, so that's coming up. I'm sure you're all starting to get preparations underway. But I did come across an organisation called the Eden Projects Communities, and they've started what's called a Big Lunch initiative across the UK, so just as a way to bring their communities together, celebrate the coronation. So I just thought about sharing that initiative, so for anyone that's in the midst of planning their celebrations, or perhaps is a bit stuck for ideas. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. So hopefully you can all see this here, and I'll pop the link in the chat as well. So what's quite nice as well is they've got a big lunch map as well. So if you did want to get involved, I think there's about 300 communities currently taking part in organising big lunches within their neighbourhoods and towns. So if I just click on the big map there, you can see there's quite a lot of people taking place. You can add yourself to the big map, and the Eden Projects are also giving away a couple of starter kits that contain some bunting, cake toppers, tea towels and so on. So I thought just for anyone that might be stuck for ideas or wants to get involved, do take a look at that. I will pop that in the chat for you. Lovely, back to you, John.
Oh, very nice. Just presenter style, like we're in the studio. Thanks, Jess. Yeah, so I'll share the results of our poll there. So let's have a quick look. So time management, number one, we usually see that. Oh, we got 30% of people, 29% there, first time they're completing it, AGAR. And then lack of confidence is in third place. So hopefully definitely Hannah will be giving you some tips on, helping you with all of those things. So over the next 60 minutes, Hannah's going to give you all that she knows on Mastering Year End. Then we're going to hand over to my colleague Nathan. He's going to give you a little overview of Scribe. It's going to literally be 5 minutes. And then we'll be jumping into the Q&A. So Hannah, how are you doing? This is actually freaking you out, isn't it, Hannah? You're not happy.
It's not my favourite thing to do, but I'm sure you're all very friendly and very nice and happy faces back at me. But yeah, this isn't necessarily my happy place. But
yes. So,
Jess, I was volunteered for this role, I believe. Yeah. How to put it.
Yeah, people don't know Hannah does such a good job of this, but then we told her we had 210 registrations for the webinar, and it absolutely, she says, oh, that's bad news. And we're going, no, that's awesome news.
That's my biggest audience so far. So
it's 120 here. Yeah,
I think that's probably probably similar to last year, but I block it out of my mind from last year, so I don't know.
You're doing a really good job of faking it, Hannah. But yeah, who's that guy at the back there on your shelf?
That's my little teddy. He's my UEA teddy from when I graduated many years ago. I was just literally working that out, and I think it's only 20 years ago. So let's not dwell on that too much.
20 years. What did you study?
I did business management.
Okay, good. And then you went on to...
And then, I took specific units in accounting, and then did accountancy after that as well. So.
Good, good. So, yeah, so I'm going to hand over to Hannah. Hannah is our resident expert. As I always say every time, we're super lucky to have Hannah because not only she has the accounting qualifications, she has so much experience working with town and parish councils, both small and large. She's come across all scenarios. Not only is she the product manager for our accounting software, but she also works within the support team, and she normally deals with some more of the more tricky questions, and then she also is available for professional services. So yeah, so she basically pretty much all this experience she knows. I really recommend you guys taking advantage of the Q&A at the end, because you've got this opportunity to ask an expert. So over to you, Hannah.
Lovely. Right, thank you. What a nice introduction that was. So I'm just going to share my screen with you all. I hope you can all see that there then. So just a quick one, because I recognise that there was lots of Scribe users on today, which is lovely. But just to say that this is not a Scribe specific session. We do run separate ones all about how to actually do it on Scribe. So do look out for that separately if you'd like to. This is more of a general session, so talking about it in more general terms. Of course, you're very welcome, and it's nice to have you here as well. So then, the secret to mastering the year end. 4 sections of this session today that I want to cover. Firstly is preparing for year end, given that we haven't got that long now because we're kind of rocketing towards the end of March. Then the AGAR itself with a specific focus on the numbers part, because that's the real sort of nitty-gritty you need to get into. Then what to do with the AGAR once we've completed it. And then finally thinking about next financial year as well. So then preparing for the year end. So obviously now we are middle of March. I started doing this session, I think we did the first one this year back sort of mid-January time. So obviously when I was doing it in January, I was talking about you've got a couple of months and you've got time to kind of get up ahead and think about these things. Now we're kind of in a scenario where we've only got a couple of weeks. And I know and recognise again from the poll, there was time management as well. So I appreciate that there's probably a lot of you part-time, limited for hours, possibly doing it alone as well, and it's just so hard to get it in. So the first thing I would suggest to do is to expect that additional workload, and hopefully you can factor it into your timetable, your schedule. We have a lot of clerks, as you can imagine, contacting us around the year end, and it always surprises me how many come through midnight, early hours, people obviously burning the midnight oil, can't sleep worrying about things. So do really, if you can, try and factor some time in. So not just for your meetings to actually sign it off, but for you to put aside to work on it. And if you're not up to date at the moment, then equally between now and the end of March, put some real time into it, because the cashbook's absolutely key. If you've got that data in, then obviously that's a real starting point here. So thinking about making sure you've got everything up to date in the next couple of weeks. Is your data on the cashbook? Have you reconciled your bank recs? Are you up to date at the moment? Have you just got March to do when it's finished? If you have got more than that, I'd really strongly recommend trying to get up to date, because you won't be able to start your year-end process until everything's in and you've reconciled your bank. That's the sort of the starting point of this whole process. And also think about your VAT as well. If you're going to be claiming the VAT back with your form 126, or if you are governed by the return dates of your VAT registered, then again thinking about your VAT. Have you got those VAT numbers? Have you checked your invoices for their information that you need, etc. So thinking about all those things now that I can be doing with regards to the cashbook, so that it's in the best place possible. Okay. And then there's just an extract from Scribe. So just thinking, if you're on Scribe, then please run it, and hopefully you at the bottom you'll be seeing A equals B checks out okay. So you're in a really good place. So that's something to be thinking about there as well. And again, the form 126. So even if you've not to the point of running it yet, you may want to just have a look at it. Have you got your VAT numbers in? Have you got your invoice dates in there? Does it look nice? If you can do anything between now and the end of March, so when that point comes, it's just a case of clicking some buttons, getting some reports off. Obviously that's going to save you some time and some stress. Absolutely. So then it's also excuse me, important just to understand what accounting approach you're going to need to use when you complete the year end. And that's particularly important because there were so many people that I saw were going to be doing this for the first time as well. So actually just making sure that you understand what you need to do is absolutely key. 2 approaches: receipts and payments, or income and expenditure. So if you're smaller, under 200,000, then you can use receipts and payments. That's if it's over 200,000 for 3 consecutive years, you do have to work in income and expenditure. So it might be that you go over the threshold because you have a large SIL money coming in, or as a grant or something happens. But if you go back under that £200,000 threshold of total income or total expenditure, you can stay within receipts and payments. But do be aware that if you're over that threshold, you have to work in income and expenditure. Just to complicate it slightly, smaller councils can opt to use income and expenditure as well. So if you've come into a council where maybe the previous clerk was particularly financially minded, or maybe the councillors are, you may find that you're working in income and expenditure even if you're small. Okay, if you're not sure about that, then I'd recommend that you look at last year's accounting statements as part of the AGAR. And if your line 7 and line 8, that we'll talk about in a little while, are the same figure, then you're almost certainly in receipts and payments. That's just important to understand that, because when you submit your accounting statements, both this year and last year must use the same accounting approach. As it says at the bottom, so if you do need to move between them, you will need to restate so that both years are the same. Okay, so if you're expecting, for example, to go over that threshold for the 3rd year and you need to move over, then be aware that you'll need to restate last year. Okay, and again, that's something to think about now, because last year you've got the information. You could do that restatement so that you're ready to start. So think about that now, and it can be a little bit complicated. There is a little bit more to think about, but it's something that you do need to address if you are moving between approaches. Okay, so if you're working in receipts and payments, it's literally just a case of recording what happened when it happened, regardless of when it relates to. You make a payment, it goes into the cash book at that point. If you receive income, it goes in as you receive it. Okay, it's as simple as that. Income expenditure is slightly more sophisticated because it starts to think about timings. When do things actually relate to? So at the end of the financial year, you'll make adjustments to say, well, actually, these payments should have gotten into this year because we've had items, goods and services received in this year. So it's thinking about sort of making adjustments for those, but a little bit more sophisticated and a bit closer to normal sort of business accounts. Okay, we'll talk about that more in a little while, but the first thing to do is, if you're unsure, is make sure you find out and you're clear which approach you're going to be taking. Okay, and then also about making sure you know what you need to do with regards to the audit. So what's the auditor going to need from you? Okay, what level of audit's required? Okay, as well. So I don't think PKF have sent theirs out yet, but that should be imminent, because I think I heard that some of the others maybe have done. So you should be receiving that information sort of very soon, so you know what you're going to need to do. If not, go and have a look at their website, because you can see all the forms on there. I did look last night and they weren't updated for 22-23 yet, but very soon you're going to get that information. Okay, so that you understand actually what you need to do and what you're going to need to provide. And I'd also recommend, if you haven't got one already, to get a copy of the JPAG Practitioner's Guide. So it's like the handbook of the AGAR, really. Okay, so if you've got any queries, you need to check anything, you can look in that Practitioner's Guide. There's a lot of information in there, but you can find what you need. Okay, so do get a copy of that, and hope we can drop a link in there that you can access if you need to, if you haven't got it. And as I mentioned, with regards to moving between accounting approaches and the requirement to restate, there may be other reasons you need to restate as well. So if last year, for example, the external auditor found an issue, they may have given you a specific thing that you need to change, that you need to restate regarding to this year. Or if you're new to the council, often that can be when at a time when you might identify something that maybe been done incorrectly before, and you've identified a need to restate as well. So just think about, is everything that you submitted last year, are you happy with that? Do you need to make any changes? And if you do, I'd make sure that you're clear with what they need to be, so that you know what your starting position is for this year, so that once you start filling in those numbers in those boxes, you've got the correct starting position. Okay, so these are all the things to be thinking about sort of in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so moving on now then to the actual AGAR. So imagining we're beyond the 31st of March now, and we need to start filling all this information in. Okay, so the AGAR, the Annual Governance and Accountability Return, so this for the financial year, which is the 1st of April to the 31st of March. Okay, and so that's when we need to complete these 3 sections in here: the internal audit report, section 1, the annual governance statement, and section 2, the accounting statement, so the numbers bit. And as I said at the start, this is the bit I really want to focus on, sort of the numbers bit in there. just noticed Jeff taking photos of it. You're very welcome to do that, but we will send all the slides out at the end of the session. So if anybody's looking at all that information, lovely, and thinking, oh my goodness, there's loads, which there is quite a lot of information in these slides, but you will get them all, so you can then look back at them if you want to refer to anything that I talk about as I go through. Okay, yes, so 3 sections here. The first 2 are kind of fairly closely related and about your internal controls and your procedures. Okay, so the first one being the internal audit report. So you need to arrange your internal auditor to come and review those things and give you a report that at the very least allows you to complete the sections in the AGAR. Okay, so if we just move on, we can see these are the things that they need to come in and check about how you're doing, your appropriate accounting records have been properly kept. So these are all the things that they're going to be coming in to review. Okay, so they need to look at those things to allow you to put a yes, no in the appropriate boxes. Okay, hopefully if you've got all those controls, procedures in place, it's going to be yeses and everything's going to be as they should be. Okay, so it's about the adequacy and effectiveness of your council controls, such as how you've worked on the precept, the asset register, the way you maintain records, etc., etc. All those sorts of things about the running of the way you do things. So carried out at least annually, and the scope and extent depends on the council's size and circumstance. Okay, so that's the first thing, that obviously you need to have an internal auditor, which will then allow you to complete this section. Okay. Moving on then, section 1, the annual governance statement. So as I said, fairly closely related. So about your effectiveness of your system and internal controls. So again, you've got some statements here that you need to be able to answer to. So either yes or no, hopefully yes. Okay. Some of them are directly linked to having the internal auditor coming in, so that someone's come and actually had that. So number 6 is that you've had an internal auditor. So once you've completed that first, what we just looked at, then you've got a yes because you've had that audit happen. Okay, so again, this is about reviewing what's the procedures that you've got in place. Are you doing things in the most appropriate way? Okay, if you aren't able to say yes to that, then you must accompany that with a separate sheet explaining what the weakness is, why you weren't able to say yes, and basically what you're doing about it. Okay, so if you've got any issues in here, then you need to think about those. How are you addressing them, and give that further information to the auditor. Okay. Moving on then, section 2, the accounting statement. So as I said, because there wasn't an updated version on PCAP, I've still got last year's in there. So obviously the right hand side is going to be March 23, and we're going to be comparing it to March 22. Okay, so the comparison, as we talked about, they have to be the same accounting approach, which is why it's so important to restate the previous year if you're moving between them. Okay, so you need to think about that. So to talk about the differences between receipts and payments and income and expenditure, and then think about the lines in here and the things to think about as you fill them in. Okay, so this information is going to come from your cash book. That's why it's so important to get all that information in your cash book reconciled to the 31st of March with your bank statement, so that you know that information is correct, and then that's your starting point for then starting to think about these numbers going in these boxes. Okay, so as we talked about, receipts and payments, that's a more simplistic way of doing your accounting. So therefore the figures can come directly from your cash book. So if you'll be pleased to know, if you're small and if you're working in receipts and payments, once you've completed that cash book, it's really just taking the numbers and putting them in the boxes, because your gross figures are going in there. You don't need to worry about the timing. It's just what happened when it happened. Okay, those of you working in income expenditure, there's a little bit more work to do. Okay, so you need to exclude VAT. So rather than it being the gross figures like it is in receipts and payments, you'll exclude the VAT, because that will constitute either a debtor or creditor, depending on whether you owe that or that's owed back to you from HMRC. And you also need to start thinking about those adjusting items. So as we said, income and expenditure is about timing. We need to reflect this financial year of what actually happened within the financial year itself, and what should have happened. Okay, so we may have some creditors, the people we owe for goods or services provided up to the end of the financial year, that we're not going to pay until the new year. So you might have had something come in March, but because of your payment approval process, you're not going to pay it till April, but you need to show that payment going out in March, because that's when that actually relates to. Okay, so that's your creditor. Debtors, so people who owe you, you've provided goods or services, the council have given goods or services, they haven't received the income yet. That's a debtor. You want to show that in the year that actually you provided the service, where the income relates to. So it's all about thinking about, what do I need to move around to accurately best reflect this financial year itself. Okay, when you're doing that, there are some things to consider. So firstly is the materiality, so the level of those adjustments. Okay, you might want to set a level. So if you look through all the invoices that you've had for things in March that you're going to pay in April, you might want to think, well, I'm not going to worry about, you know, £5 invoice for a few pens or some stamps or the smaller bits, and say, and set a level £50, £100, depending on the size of your council. Once you've set that, just stick with that, okay? But don't worry about necessarily about the smaller bits and bobs, okay? And also the regularity of the things that you're adjusting for. So if you have something that goes in every single month, but maybe you pay in arrears, you don't necessarily have to adjust it. If, for example, you have a grounds maintenance contractor, they come in and do the work, and every month they bill you £1,000. So they billed you for March, you're not going to pay them until April. Is that a creditor? Well, if actually that happened the whole of the financial year and you've got 12 months worth of invoices in, then I wouldn't worry about it, because you've represented that 12 months worth of cost to you. Okay. The only time you might want to consider that is if it happened to be that they came in March and went over and above their normal rate. They did some additional tree works, hedge cutting, whatever it might be. There's an additional value on their invoice, and you might want to put that in, because that's over and above what they normally do and represents the cost to you in March in the financial year itself. Okay, so it's all about thinking about what do I need to think about and move around. Okay, and also important, of course, to make sure that last year's adjustments are reversed. If you've got software, that will almost certainly do it for you. But I noticed there was a few spreadsheets and even a couple of paper users as well. So if you're doing it like that, then obviously you need to do some manual calculations to make sure you're reversing those adjustments that you had from last year and then replacing with those adjustments that you're putting in for this year. Okay. Excuse me. Right then, so let's just have a look at a few examples. So I've just taken this directly from Scribe just to give you some examples of some adjustments we've put in. So I've got an accrual there for printer copy. So just to explain the difference between creditors and accruals, because we've had this question before. Creditors are where you've got specific invoices from your suppliers that you know you've had that goods and services provided before the end of March. You've had the invoice, you're not going to pay them until April or beyond. That's a creditor. Similar things in accrual, but it's where you haven't got a specific invoice or cost, but you want to recognize there's likely to be a cost. So in this example, I know I've been using the printer, I haven't had my invoice, and therefore I've put in an accrual, an estimated value that I think I need to pay that relates to this, and it's going to have the same effect as my creditors, but I haven't actually got an invoice to represent it. I'm making an adjustment given the information that I have. Maybe I've made some copies and I want to reflect that. Okay. Also, you may have prepayments. So this is the reverse of that, where you might have paid for something that as of yet you're not going to have the benefit of until April. So in this scenario, I've paid the builder for something. He hasn't been able to start the work. That's now going to happen in the new financial year, and therefore I'm moving that cost to next year. So it's all about thinking about where do these timings sit. And as we said, some debtors. So I've got some unpaid invoices for my allotment fees. My customers have had, the users had the use of the allotment, they haven't paid, and therefore I want to reflect the debtors in this financial year. You may also have the reverse of that that's not on here, so receipts in advance where people have already paid you, but they haven't had the service. So it might be hall hire, people pay you up ahead, but you're going to give them the venue hire in the new financial year. You want to move that income to next year when they're going to get the benefit of that service. Okay, so as we said, think about all moving it around. If you're working in receipts and payments, you don't need to worry about any of that. And sometimes that seems almost too simplistic, but it doesn't matter. You're just recording what happened when it happened. Okay. So as we said then, I wanted to think about the lines in here. So hopefully if I go back just to here again, you're all familiar with this, and you're aware that even if this is your first year, hopefully you've gone back and looked at last year and what was done, and you know you need to fill in this sheet and information of all these different boxes of the values that relate to these lines in here. Okay, I want to talk about them each in turn because there's some things just to consider as we go through. Okay, so line 1 is your balances brought forward and ensure it's equal to box 7 of last year. So that sounds fairly obvious, but I would just make sure that when you're starting at this year, you have actually made sure that what you submitted last year is what you've put in, particularly if you had a few versions, and also if you've had to restate. Make sure absolutely clear where your starting point is, and your box 1, your line 1's correct. Okay. Line 2 is your precepts or your rates or levies. So that's what that says, but it's just the precept. Rates, levies refers to drainage boards only. So make sure it's just the precepts. And also be mindful if you receive the precept along with anything else from your district authority. So if they pay you council tax support grant, something like that, that you're just showing the precept. Even if you sort of received a lump sum, you extract the precept element out only into line 2. Okay, total other receipts there is all your other receipts. Okay, so everything else you had in terms of income. Excuse me. So don't include any bank transfers in that. So movements of money need to be excluded from that because it's just internal within the council. Okay, so it's not one in, one receipts on one side, payment on the other. Also ignore VAT if you're working in income and expenditure. So for receipts and payments, it's just the total other receipts. Okay, I&E, no VAT. And also be mindful as well about the way that you deal with refunds. So if you have a credit note, a refund, correction of an overpayment with a supplier, and you receive that money in, it is not a receipt. Okay, it's a negative payment. It's a correction of a payment. Okay, so just be mindful of that, because often we see people putting it in because they've received some money from their supplier, but it's not. It's a correction of your book 6 payments, because otherwise you're going to end up overstating your receipts. Okay, so do just be aware of that. Moving on, then line 4 is your staff costs. So that's your core staff costs, your salary, your pension, your NI, your tax. It's not other things like training, mileage. Okay, so even if you might report them like that for your council in terms of your overall staff costs, make sure you're aware that on the AGAR and the accounting statements, it's just your core staff costs. Okay. Line 5 is your loan interest capital repayment. So if you've got a loan and you're making repayments against that loan, then that needs to go into line 5. Okay, and then line 6 is everything else, so all other payments. So your total payments figure less your staff costs less your loan repayments goes into box 6. The same thing is true as I talked about for receipts. No bank transfers, no movements of money internally. Okay, exclude VAT if you're working in income expenditure. And the same flip side as well, if you've got customers that you refund, despite the fact that you might make a payment to them, it doesn't go in as a payment, it goes in as a correction to receipts. Okay, so if somebody paid you for haul hire £100 and you gave them the £100 back because they cancelled, okay, it's not a receipt and a payment, it's a receipt and a negative receipt to cancel that out. Otherwise, as I said, you're going to end up with an overstated position. So just be mindful of that if you have that scenario as well. Okay. Moving on then, so line 7 is our balances carried forward. And this is just about maths, okay, so making sure it adds up, that what you've put in the boxes actually does sum to it, because I've seen, and even ones that have made it through the external auditor, where they don't actually add up. So you're trying to put them, the figures in the system, they come to people to join Scribe, it doesn't actually work because the numbers don't add up. So sounds obvious, but please do check that it is opening position 1 plus precept and other receipts 2 and 3, less your payments of staff costs, loan repayments, and book 6 other payments, okay, will be equal to your line 7. Okay. Line 8 is your bank rec position, so your total value of cash and short-term investments. So that would be your bank reconciliation. And as I said, you can't start this process until your bank reconciliation balances at the 31st of March. So that box 8 figure, that line 8 figure, will be your total bank position. If you are working in receipts and payments, then line 7 and line 8 must be the same, okay, because there are no adjustments here. It is just reflecting how the different boxes of information that come to that value of line 7 to equal to line 8. If you have got a difference, it may be due to the way that you've dealt with unpresented items, okay. And something else just to explain, because this can confuse people as well. So both users in receipts and payments and income and expenditure can have unpresented items. Okay, they're not the same as year-end adjustments that are only related to income and expenditure. An unpresented item is where you've sent off, say, a check most of the time. Okay, so a payment that hasn't cleared on the bank, or you've had income that hasn't cleared on the bank. You've logged it in the cash book, but it doesn't appear on the bank statement before the 31st of March. Okay, so as I said, most of the time it's checks. So unpresented items are less frequent than they used to be as we move away from check payments and obviously online banking, because they're instant. So you're not going to have a time delay here with people having to wait for them to cash the check. So do be aware, just make sure if you're completely clear, because I do very often see people carrying unpresented items that aren't unpresented. They're actually debtors or creditors where they should have paid for something, but they haven't. If you haven't made the payment by the end of the year, or you haven't physically received that income by the end of the year, it is not an unpresented item. Okay. So moving on then to that sort of top section we talked about, going down to 8, is all from your cash book that payments in, payments out, and the reconciliation of that to allow you to fill in those boxes. Then at the bottom section, you've got line 9, which is your fixed assets and your long-term investments. So you need to put the total in them in that box for that. Obviously update for any new assets or disposals for this year. So again, if you've got a bit of time between now and the end of March, you can think about just updating your asset register if anything's changed since last year. Okay. Again, you need to be consistent with regards to your reporting. The majority of the time, it will be the original purchase value. Okay, so if you're any uncertainty or it's a very old item that you've had, you'll be using that proxy pound for things like that you don't know, what the value was at that point. And obviously, you need to make sure the asset register holds all the relevant information that backs up that figure in line 9. And you ignore depreciation. So that's a question I've had previously when people come in from a more commercially financial background, they expect there to be some depreciation on assets. There is not. It goes in at the value that you buy it for, and it sits in there until you dispose it, and then it's gone from the asset register. It just shows as a payment when you buy it. If you get any proceeds, you'd have it as a receipt, and it's as simple and straightforward as that. And then line 10 is borrowings. So that's obviously your loan figure, what's the outstanding amount on the loan as at the end of the year. Okay, so you make sure that figure that matches to the schedule that you've got for what's outstanding at the end of the year. Okay. So that's the actual numbers part you need to complete. Okay, along with that physical AGAR that you'll be provided by the external auditor, you also need to have some accompanying information. So you'll have your bank reconciliation. So as we said, absolutely key to that to agree to your line 8. If you are completing an income expenditure, you will have a reconciliation between line 7 and 8. So as we said, line 7 and 8 are the same if you work in receipts and payments, you don't need nothing to explain. If you work in an income expenditure, line 7 and 8 will almost certainly be different, and that will be because of the value of anything that you've adjusted for, VAT, debtors, creditors, etc. And you need to explain that difference. Okay. You also need to explanation of variances. So this is variances based on last year compared to this year. Okay, so variances over 15% for lines 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10, you need to explain. Okay, so if they fluctuated significantly from this year to last year, either up or down, you need to explain it. And also if box 7, which is your closing balances, your total end of year funds, is more than twice line 2, which is your precept. So that basically means they are holding quite a significant amount of money in the bank, okay, and they want to understand why that is. Now, of course, you should have your general reserve, so equivalent to 3 to 12 months operating costs if you have any cash flow issues or unexpected things happening, okay. But other than that, you'll have some, you may have other reserves, excuse me, and that's absolutely fine to hold reserves for project specific purposes. But if you've got a significant amount, you may be building up to do a really large project, build a community centre, whatever it is, refurbish something, whatever it may be, that's absolutely fine. But if line 7 is more than twice line 2, you will need to explain it, okay, and just give a breakdown of those reserves. As you're doing this, just be mindful of giving full numerical explanations as well. So don't, if your income's gone up, receipts have gone up from last year, and you just put, oh, had more higher in the haul, or this happened. Don't be sort of general about it. They want specific sort of numerical answers to break it down and give reasons why. Okay, you don't want the auditor to come back to you and ask you for more information. Okay, so that's the additional information that you'll be providing alongside the AGAR. Okay. So that was quite a big section, but now we've got to that point, hopefully, where we've completed it. We've got all our AGAR completed, we've done our accounting statements, we've got our supporting information. So now we need to think, what do we actually do with it at this point? Okay. So the first thing to do, therefore, is the RFO to sign off the accounting statements, and then you will need to have your meeting, because you will need to receive, note, approve, sign it all off. Okay, so that's absolutely key. Once you've done that, before you can then move on to setting exercise of public watch, you need to go through this sign-off process at this meeting to do that. So as it says there, quite a lot of information in the next few slides here, but it will be sent out to you so you can look back at it. But this meeting, then you're going to receive and note the internal audit report, approve the annual governance statement, approve the accounting statements. Now at this point, you may be able to, if relevant, approve the certificate of exemption. So if you're a smaller council, and once you've got to the year-end point, both your total income and your total expenditure is less than 25,000, you can certify yourself exempt from audit. You do have to meet a couple of other criteria regarding being in formation for more than 3 years, I think it is, and have no previous audit issues, but do look, just make sure that you're completely clear and you meet all that criteria. But if you're able to exempt yourself from audit, you still need to complete the AGAR, you just don't send it to the external auditor. Okay, so you save yourself the fee and you don't have to send it off, but you still have to complete it. So don't think that doesn't mean you have to do anything. Okay, so if that's the case and you're under that threshold, you can approve that certificate at this meeting as well. And then the chairman and clerk sign the annual governance statement and the chairman signs the accounting statements. Okay, so that's all that approving and sort of finalising of the AGAR itself. Okay. That then allows you, or the RFO, to set the commencement date for the exercise of public rights. So this means that any accounting record must be made available to view any interested person. So if somebody wants to look at the accounting or the work that you've done, they need to be able to access that. And you need to give them a specific period in which to do that, which is 30 working days and must include the first 10 working days of July. So you need to work out, make sure that time period has those working days in it. So the earliest you can go, the latest you can go. When you get the information from the auditor and the form that they want you to fill in about the dates that you provided, it will likely say at the bottom the earliest date range you can run and the latest you can do it. So make sure you fit them in, because again, I have seen audits come back with the issue that the date range was incorrect, or that the meeting and that it wasn't approved and signed off before that date period was set. Okay, so you can't set this date until you've approved them off you. That date can't start until that is all approved. Okay, so make sure those things are going to run and you work back to the meeting date so that you can get all that done. Okay, so that's quite key. So AGAR must be approved and published before that inspection period starts. That's absolutely key to make sure you've got that meeting date in place to do that, and then you start that inspection period. Okay. Okay then, so if you are able to exempt yourself from audit, you only need to send the certificate of exemption to the external auditor. That's all they need. Okay. Excuse me. If not, though, you will need to send the AGAR off to them along with any other information you need to provide them. So that will be explanation of variances, the bank reconciliation, details of the exercise of public rights, and any other information. So it might be your reconciliation between box 7 and 8 if you're working in income expenditure. It might be reasons why you needed to restate if it was relevant that you restated last year. It might be reasons why you weren't able to answer yes to in the annual governance statement and the corrective action that you're now taking. So any other information that you need to provide along with it, okay, needs to go to the external auditor. And then you can publish those documents. So if you're exempt from audit, you can put all the information on. So it's basically the AGAR, the additional information, the arrangement of the public rights, and the names and address of the external auditor. So you can put that on your website, all as once if you've got that. Okay. If you're not exempt, then you will put this on. So it's again the AGAR, but this time a declaration that the accounts are as yet unaudited. So you provide that information, but you're still waiting for that certificate to come back from the external auditor. Okay. So when you do get that back, you would just add in the notice of the conclusion of audit and then the signed off certificate version of the AGAR itself along with their report. Okay, so there's just a two-step process there. The information that you've got at that point, and when you get it signed off and back from the auditor, you'd update it. Okay, so quite a lot in there, and it's all covered in all the details that you'll get from the auditor, but this is just kind of intended to be a little bit of an extract, just to break it down a little bit more, but it is all in the slides if you need them. Okay, so just to finish off, I also want to sort of mention at this point as well how important it is to look ahead to the new financial year. Now you might be thinking, I haven't even got time to think about next financial year. I've got 2 weeks, I've got my cash book to do, I've got to reconcile my bank, I've got to restate the year. Oh my goodness, this is just intense. But actually, it's almost important to think about next year as well, particularly if you're a bit larger. Some of the people we speak to, if they're a bit smaller, got a little less going on, they will complete their financial year end and then they'll start their new financial year. So that's quite sort of a luxury if you're able to do that. A lot of the time, if you've got more going on, you're a bigger council, you're going to be running your new financial year whilst trying to complete the year end for this current financial year as well. So you've got to think about those two things in parallel. Okay, so this is a good time now to think about what actually was really hard this year. As I start collating this information for the year end, What did I not like about my cash book? What was tricky? What was the problem for me? Okay, so set that cash book up, get ready. So it's ready for you from the 1st of April, because that's again something you might not want to be thinking about in April. You can do that now. But also maybe think about objectively reviewing your accounts records or the cash book that you use, and think about, actually, is now a good time, because often it is from a new financial year, to think about changing some of the things about it. So it might be, is your accounting system fit for purpose? Does it do all the things you want it to do? And that's not only in terms of the information that it holds, but actually, is it secure? You know, is it all on one laptop? And if that laptop blew up, have I lost everything? You know, is it safe and secure? Can other people get access to it? Can I easily share that information with my counsellors, for example? Do you need training on it? You know, have you actually had some formal training on it? Did you just get handed a laptop and you just had to model your way through? Is there a handbook? If you left and it went to somebody else, is there any training manuals that you can give them, or anybody else that knows how it works? Does it suit the needs of your council? So was it set up 5 years ago and it's this lovely spreadsheet, but actually loads of things have changed, nobody's updated it, the person who set it up left, and now you don't know how to, you know, change the cells or do the formula, or it's really complicated and it's just too much for you and you don't know really what you're doing with it. How could improvements be made? Okay, what would you like to do differently? How could you think about changing it? Are you not able to get information out very easily? Does it hold all of that information? Do you have to keep looking stuff up in the filing cabinet to find what you need? So it might be a change of medium. So those of you, a couple of people, I think we're still using paper. Is now the time to move on to a spreadsheet or some software? Do you want to think about doing something differently? Or maybe it's just the way that you've broken it down. So the coding structure that you're using when you enter that information into your cash book. So in terms of the structure of your cash book, I'd very strongly recommend that you base it on your council budget, your preset breakdown. We have lots of people who come to us at Scribe and they join Scribe, and they've got a lovely budget broken down line by line, budget lines, budget values against each of those lines. And then they have a cash book that bears absolutely no resemblance to that budget. It's just sort of columns of information. So if somebody said, can you tell me what have we spent against this budget line? It's actually really hard to break it down. But obviously, if you've got that and you allocate your transactions out to those budget lines, it makes that reporting so much easier. And think about it in terms of grouping. So for example, there's the village hall. If somebody says to me, how much is it costing to run the village hall? Can you easily get a report that shows all the costs that are associated with it? So just think about that as you set it up. What do I need to report on? What is the information that I need to easily get to? And if it's taking me a long time to collate it, what could I do differently? So could you put additional codes in? You might find it's just all too broad. You know, you've just got maybe a code for admin and you're sort of putting everything in there, and it's the phone, it's the printer, it's electricity, it's stationery, it's everything. I want to break it down and need more information. Or maybe you've got the opposite problem. It's too detailed. You've got a code for every single thing you can think about. Maybe you only use one of these codes once a year or never, not at all. Could you take them out? Could you make it a bit more streamlined? And have you got all that information to make it easy to refer to? Do you put enough information into the cash book? So that might be, do you put in the invoice date, the invoice number, the VAT number? You know, if you're constantly going back to rifle through all your paperwork to look stuff up, could you record it in the cash book just to make it that bit easier to get to? So it's all about thinking, how can I just make my life a little bit easier, particularly when you come to this kind of pressurized situation such as the year end and all that additional work. What can I do just to speed things up and make things that little bit easier? Okay, so just as a really quick example, I've taken from Scribe just to show you sort of a structure that you might want. I've got admin and town hall as a couple of examples down there, and I've got my cost codes that break it down, and the budget sits against it, and my actuals are feeding through. So I can instantly say, this is what's happened with regards to the town hall. So it's just thinking about grouping things together, breaking things down in an appropriate way so I can report on them. Okay. And I believe that takes me to the end. So lots and lots of stuff in there, but I will stop sharing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Hannah. So we're going to go to Q&A in a moment. Remember to keep Q&A focused on kind of generic issues, not specific to Scribe. We have separate events related to that mastering year round on Scribe. I've already got a bunch of questions lined up. So if you have asked a question, get ready to put your video on if you're okay with that, and unmute so you can ask your question. But before we go into that, I'm going to jump over to my colleague Nathan, who's just going to give 5 minutes overview of Scribe and how it can help you with year end.
Thank you, John, and thanks to everyone for joining us today for our webinar all around mastering year end. My name is Nathan, and some of you may have already spoken with me in the past, and I just wanted to dive into some of the details about our software at Scribe that we have for managing your council accounts and how that can actually help you when it comes to some of these year-end tasks that we've been discussing today, and just do just a general overview of the software itself. So it won't take too much of your time, but I'll just dive into some of the more basic details about our software. So first of all, starting with our normal website here at scribeaccounts.com. This, of course, is where I can come to sign into Scribe. So that does, of course, mean that it's fully cloud-based and it can be accessed from any device and any location. You can also have unlimited users for our system, which can all work in the system simultaneously and have all of their own custom permissions for their access levels for the software. So you could have people set up on a read-only basis, for admin access, or just access invoicing, for example, so that they can't dive into other parts of the system. The website is also where you'll find some of the main channels for our support team, where we'll have the help guides available for you at any time, and Scribe Academy, where we host webinars on different topics specific to the Scribe software that you're always free to jump into. And then if I go ahead and sign in here, you've also got this button at the bottom right, which will open a dialogue with the support team for any one-to-one support you need to request. But you can also just call us on a normal landline anytime Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But for clarity, all of those avenues for support are always included while you're with us at Scribe and come at no additional cost. Jumping into then the software itself, as we go into the transactions section here, we can look respectively at our list of payments or receipts and log any new ones using the plus buttons at the top, where we can record information such as minute references for tying it to particular meetings, logging them as section 137 transactions, awaiting authorization, and then recording any power used relating to the spend of that transaction as well. But then back on my main transaction screen, if I wanted to see some more specific information based upon what I'm looking for, I can use the filter at the top right and come down to group records. There's plenty of filter terms at the top that you can search by, but if I come to group records and I wanted to group my transactions by cost code and then see the totals relating to each, I can apply that filter and then see on the left all of those cost codes and the total amount of transactions assigned to each of them. You could then, if you wanted to use this for disclosing information in regards to your transactions as per the transparency code, you could use the columns feature at the top right to remove any details that you perhaps don't want to share with any of that information that you want to upload. Once you've then customized this, you can come to actions at the top right and go to print. This is where you'll then be able to generate a printable version of this to then share. We also can generate and raise your invoices within Scribe. And in here, of course, I can raise a new invoice in the same way you saw with the transaction screen and send these out respectively as emails directly to the customers that we have these assigned to. But when it comes to your invoicing, we do also have full integrations with our cemetery bookings and allotments modules as well, which can handle each of those things respectively. But all activity that you generate in those modules that would then require an invoice can be raised and sent through to accounts. Those invoices will then raise your transactions for you as well when you actually then record them as paid. So it's speeding up a lot of that workflow when it comes to those additional modules. Looking back down the left again, we then also have sections for managing your budgets and reserves within Scribe, of course. And then we have for VAT just underneath that. And whether you're VAT registered or not, you will be able to raise your 126 or 100 respectively in Scribe. And if you are VAT registered, Scribe does fully link with the Making Tax Digital portal, allowing you to submit your VAT reclaims directly from Scribe without leaving the system. As we then move into year end, of course, firstly and most importantly, for the section 2 of our AGAR, we can jump into annual return and generate this report to just see that straight away and then proceed from here. And then as we go to our explanation of variances as well, this is fully this will give you a page in Scribe which will allow you to enter in your explanations before actually then jumping into your populated explanation of variances report. Main difference here, of course, is that everything we're looking at is in receipts and payments. We can switch this over to income and expenditure to show you for the benefit of any of you that are in income and expenditure. And as we jump into here, one of the first main things for me to make you aware of is that within our system, it reports on a day-to-day basis in receipts and payments. And when we convert everything over at year end, that will then put all of our year-end documents, of course, then into income and expenditure. But that's one of the main things to be aware of. But when we then have, of course, our annual return and explanation of variances, just like we did with running through on receipts and payments, but we then have our additional income and expenditure reports for the reconciliation between boxes 7 and 8 and your balance sheet and other documents such as that. You also have your asset register in Scribe, which will keep track of all of the data of your assets, acquisition date, purchase value, current value. But this is fully included with Scribe. This comes as standard with the accounts package. I can, of course, record a location for any of my assets as well using the What 3 Words website, where I can then click onto here to then see the location that we've stored for our assets. So that was just a very quick preview of our software. As I said, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if anyone would be interested in discussing this any further with me, would be more than happy to set up a one-to-one session for you so that we can run through our accounts package in detail based upon your needs, along with the additional modules that we have available if you did want to look at any of them further. So if anyone would like to discuss that with me on a more detailed basis, feel free to just pop your details in the chat and I'll endeavor to contact you all over the course of the next 24 hours where we could then talk about it a bit further. But thanks for allowing me to disturb your webinar today, and good luck everyone with your year end, and thank you, John.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nathan. Much appreciated. So hopefully he showed you there how really year end should be just a tap of a button. There is no year-end shutdown as such. You could just do it very easily as a clerk. You can even open up your next financial year while you're closing down the current financial year, which makes it easy getting prepared. And if you kind of make a few mistakes, it's very easy to correct them and in your transactions, etc. So we do have time to go. We've got 5 minutes scheduled, but I think, Hannah, you are available to do questions after the scheduled time. Also, I think Paul Reynolds is still around. Paul Reynolds messaged me during the event. He's also available. He runs the internal audit forum. That influences NALC. He's available for Q&A as well. So thanks, Paul. So I've got some. I've been collecting the questions there. So the first one was asked by Caroline Higgins. Caroline, are you still there? If you are, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. Hannah, it's me again.
Hello.
Hello. We're expecting a largish payment, about £65,000 on literally the last day of the year. It's to manage land, which is being transferred over to us. So we'll be using about 5,000 in the next year, and then after that there'll be a sort of sinking fund effectively. Obviously I'll put that into a reserve, but I wonder whether that should go in as a long-term investment or a short-term investment. What would you think?
Generally where you're going to put it, generally sort of outside of?
It would probably be going into the public sector deposit fund, so in CCLA, or most of it will obviously the 60, and then we'll just keep the 5 for the year ahead.
Yeah, so that's absolutely fine. And then just keep it in there. Make sure you've got it as a reserve, so it's separate from everything else. But then that's there to then manage it.
But you wouldn't need to put it into a long-term investment. You wouldn't call it.
Not if it's an accessible account. Depends what you put. So if it's only access, yes. Yeah, that's fine. So it just stays in there. It just doesn't go into long-term investments. It's just a reserve.
Okay, fine. Thanks for that.
Lovely. Thank you, Caroline.
Awesome. Thanks, Caroline. Rose Love, are you around still?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, ask your question. Yes.
Well, mine was just it actually already got answered. I think I've been in my post since 2019, and I've never claimed VAT, but I was sent to correct link, so I think I'm okay. I do have a separate question that I didn't put down because I lacked the proper training. I didn't realize when you did all of your numbers at the end of the year that it was not supposed to include any VAT that was paid. So I was just putting down the full invoice amounts.
Yeah, it depends on if you work in income and expenditure, the way you complete them is different. So is it done in income and expenditure?
No, it's receipts and payments.
Well, that's fine. Receipts and payments is total gross figure, so you don't need to worry about excluding any VAT. You just put it in as totals. That's fine.
Okay, good, because I thought this is our first year having to send it to the external audit, and I was afraid that was gonna like come back on us.
Okay, yeah, so you're above the exemption, so that's fine. Yeah, if you receipts and payments, just take it directly from the cash book total gross figures, including that. That's absolutely
okay. Fine. Great, thank you.
That's good. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Rose. Cool name, Rose Love.
Thank you.
Tracy Sansom, also cool name. Are you around, Tracy? Maybe this would be relevant to everybody if she's not. My box 7 last year was 30k. Does that mean I am over the 25?
So it's total payments or total receipts in terms of if it's in regards to exemption, it's the total. So you need to make sure what actually went through and then went out. Both, and if it's either one, it's not both of them. It's one or the other. So if one of receipts or payments or totals are over, you can't be exempt. Okay. Some of you may be on that edge and you just have to wait to the end of March just to see what happens if it pushes you over. But obviously if you're over that point now, then you can start preparing.
Cool. Okay. Jeff Lawrence, are you around?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Jeff.
I've written 2 more questions down since I asked my last one. It was just about when you restate your figures, do you actually have to give a reason somewhere?
Yes, so when you restate it, at the top of the prior year column in the actual accounting statement, you will write in block figures restated so that the external auditor will know it's not the same as what you actually submitted last year. And then you can provide a separate document just to say, what the difference is, why there was a restatement, so they can refer and go, oh, yes, I can see that difference and what happened along there. So they just explain. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Did you have another one, Jeff?
Yes, I did. I think you might have said it, but I didn't quite hear. You mentioned about general reserves.
Yes.
And what was an accepted amount of reserves to hold, outside of what you've got for projects.
Oh, yes. So obviously you can have as much as you need for your other reserves, projects, etc. But generally, the sort of general rule of thumb is between 3 to 12 months. So operating, if you're very small, you'll have closer to 12 months equivalent because something could happen and be quite significant if you have, if you're a smaller council. Those of you are much larger, we'll be working to sort of 3 months. It's generally sort of net expenditure, but it's kind of the sort of, if you core is sort of your precept level looking at that. But if you read the JPAG practitioner's guide, it will give you a bit more information, but generally between 3 to 12 months, depending on how big you are.
That's great. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Westdean Council. I don't know the.
I am here. Oh, sorry,
Hey.
my name's Kim.
Hi, Kim.
I'm fairly new as the clerk, and we switched to income and expenditure last year in April from goods and receipts because we've been tripping over that £200,000 sort of income and expenditure level for the last 3 years. But I'm not sure about adjustments from last year. I know I got a restate last year, but I'm not sure what adjustments I might have to make. And I also didn't realise that I didn't include the VAT. So I've learned
so you need to
today.
Out. Yeah, so you've got a little bit of work to do that. If you haven't got software, then unfortunately it is a bit of a
we've got software. We use Edge.
Okay, so they might have the facility to strip that out, because if you're on Scribe and you need to move between them, we'd have to have you a little bit, but basically you can rerun the previous year in the one that you need to do it in. So if you move between them, you can rerun it. So it may be worth asking them if they can. You basically go back to the year and rerun it in Scribe, and you've got all the figures once you put the additional information in. But yes, you do have to exclude the VAT, so you need to make sure that was in there. And you might also want to consider, if you do want to make any adjustments, I'd only worry about them sort of if they're significant. The main thing is the VAT and getting that extracted.
Yeah, strangely enough, from my budget spreadsheet, because I've got a budget spreadsheet, that I've taken the VAT out of everything for next year. So
yes,
I'd already done that, and last year I didn't realise because I'd only been clerk since the September, so I only.
It's a tricky one, that sort of restatement. So
new to accounts, like everybody else, learn along the way.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Kim.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Kathy Kennedy. We will move on. I mean, that just asks, does line 4 include pensions? That's a quick
Yes,
one.
it does. Yeah.
Cool.
But again, the JPAG Practitioner's Guide will tell you. So if you're not sure, have a look in the practitioner.
Cool. Sarah Stock, and then after that, Alison Robinson. Sarah Stock. She said RMP accounting is insurance claim against works income or to be treated like a credit note.
So separately, so you don't net it. So if insurance comes in, because it's a separate organisation to whoever then does some work, the claim, whatever it may be, so record them separately.
Cool.
Thank you.
Oh, good.
Oh, you're there. Hello.
Hello, Sarah. Sorry, you may. Alison Robinson, are you around?
Yes, I am around, John.
Yeah.
I've forgotten how I phrased my question.
You had a couple. You had one about RMP and corrections, and then tiny parish.
I'm assuming Nathan will contact me.
Oh yeah, Nathan will
Yes,
contact you on that one.
Yeah, thank you. Nathan, if you could avoid today and tomorrow, and Friday. If you could avoid this week, I'd be really grateful. Thank you.
Thanks for the heads up.
Okay, cool.
I haven't in the past I think I've been doing corrections wrong in the past.
Yeah.
And I've never been pulled up by the internal auditor, who actually is a professional auditor. And so I'm not really sure how I should be showing them, or what I can work out how that I just take them out of the amount in my cash book if it's a correction because there was an error.
Yes, yes.
No,
So
it
basically
isn't.
that's the key thing to think about. If you've done something wrong and you put, say, a receipt and a payment, then obviously those things are going to overstate. So think about them. So if you're extracting them, that's fine. Sometimes if you put them in Scribe as a receipt and a payment, it wouldn't take it out because it doesn't know it's a correction. So if you're manually correcting that, then it's probably achieving what you want it to. But in terms of the way you record it, particularly in software, if you put, for example, as a payment and a negative, it will cancel it out in the correct way. So that's just thinking about how you.
Okay, I hope the local council police aren't on this call because I actually know I've done it wrong in the past.
Okay.
But thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jeff Price.
Hi.
Hey,
could you just I think I've asked a couple. Could you just remind me which one it is?
Are reserves based on gross operating costs?
Oh yeah. I find the reserves thing a really strange beast because the 3 to 12 months is such a wide margin.
Yeah.
Therefore, obviously, basically we have, obviously gross costs, which I imagine is what you're reserving against, and then income coming in for whole hire and cemetery type stuff. So obviously you end up with a net cost, which is essentially the precepts.
Yes. Yeah.
So is the reserves based on that net or the gross?
Yeah, sort of the cause of that precept element of it, and the 3 to 12 months would depend on how big are you? What sort of?
200 to well, again, net cost 200 to 250, gross cost.
Okay.
Income's about 75 and gross is about 300.
Okay, so not tiny. So I thought you were going to say you're really, really little. So you're probably.
I wish we were.
Yeah, yeah. So I was going to say 12 months. So yeah, so you'll be somewhere sort of 3 to 6 months probably then, depending. But it depends how you want to manage it, because you may have don't know if you haven't got a specific sort of control or procedure somewhere to keep what you have, because some councils are very specific and actually have an amount that they work towards, but depending on, you might want to think about what.
Yeah, I mean, things like we've got a couple of earmarked things, like we've got an election coming up this year, which is quite costly apparently. I'm also conscious that our energy costs potentially going to triple, so I'm hoping I can reserve a bit this year.
Yeah. So those sort of specific extra things, and then they can be over and above the general reserve. Lovely.
But we're covered. I think it's about 6 months of gross costs, so that is comfortable, is it, in your opinion?
I think that sounds fine. That sign of size as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. We got another reserve related question from Sarah Robson. Sarah, you in the house? Sarah? I'll ask it quickly. It's the last question. Calculations for reserve requirements must be based on net revenue equivalent. Oh, no, she's actually making a statement. Oh, yeah. Given closer to 3 months for large council. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, that's just the thing we were talking about.
Not a question. Is there any other questions? Feel free to put your hand up. Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a team shot. Oh, Jan, she's put her hand up.
Hi. It's
it seems such a little question, but I'm just tidying up my cash book now, quite new to the role. I've inherited a spreadsheet. There's only one column for date, and the previous clerk always put in the date of the meeting. And my chairman says I should be putting in the date of the invoice. Somebody else said I should be putting in the date of the payment.
Yeah.
It's locked. So
okay.
And I've only got the one column.
Are you in receipts and payments, Jan?
Yes.
Yes, the date of the payment then. So it's all about when it actually happened. So it doesn't matter about the invoice date. You could have paid an invoice from last year, the year before, the date of the payment.
Date of payment. That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
And if we have to, it took 4 months for me to become the responsible financial officer, or for the bank to recognise.
Oh yes, bank saga, yeah.
Oh,
and I know that during that time things were not done as they should be. So when we come to complete the AGAR, if I genuinely feel that I should put no somewhere, well, I'm frightened of going to prison.
No. As long as if you have to answer no, then what they're going to want from you is why is it a no, and what are you doing about the fact it's a no. But if you can obviously give them something on that basis, then it's fine to say that you're new to the role and you found these issues and these things are not done correctly, but actually we've addressed it and we're going to do this about it. It's better to be open and transparent than saying yes and actually get caught out on something.
Rather than putting yes.
Yeah.
Or otherwise you can get us all to come round. All of you, and we'll come support you. We got your back. Cool. So can everyone put on their camera, their Zoom? I just want to do a wave, and I'll take a screenshot, team screenshot, and to show your appreciation to so turn on your camera, show your appreciation to Hannah for putting on this event. Much appreciated. So I'll just get ready now. All those beautiful faces looking really good. Keep waving because I'm getting ready for my screenshot. Thank you very much. Cheers. Smile. There we go. Hopefully I got you all looking perfect. Otherwise, yes, we'll email you afterwards a recording and the slides and everything. Have a really good day. Good luck with year end, and yes, see you all later. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Nathan. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.